All right, well, I think we can go ahead and get started. So thank you everybody who's here and joined us today for IPHA's third Thursday Lunch and Learn web series. I hope you're home, staying warm, enjoying your snow day if you're having snow wherever you are in the state. My name is Brett Norris. I'm the communications coordinator for IPHA. We've got a great lineup of lunch and learns planned this entire spring. It doesn't feel like spring, but this is the spring season. We've got a great lineup, and today's no different. This session is being recorded and it'll be posted to IPHA's YouTube channel later this month. Before we get started, just a couple housekeeping items. Your microphone should be muted during the presentation, just to help keep bandwidth and make sure everybody can hear the presenter. But you'll have plenty of opportunities to unmute, turn your camera on, and ask any questions you'd like throughout or at the end during Q&A, whatever you prefer, or you can throw your questions in the chat. Today we're joined by Paige Yontz from AARP Iowa, who will help get us to know the organization. So I'll hand it over to her and we'll do a presentation, and then there'll be plenty of time, like I said, for Q&A. All right, Paige.
All right, well, thank you, Brett. It is so great to be here, everybody. Like Brett said, my name is Paige Yontz, and I am with AARP Iowa. I am their state advocacy manager. Brad Anderson, who some of you may know, is our state director, and he was originally going to give this talk today, but he is out of town working on something with AARP National, so I'm filling in for him today. So I'm going to share a few slides. I really want to encourage a conversational kind of approach to this presentation. If you have a question, please feel free to unmute, put it in the chat. Would love to hear from you. And we'll keep it casual, nothing too crazy, but want to give you a great overview of who AARP is and how we've been involved with IPHA over the years and what we're looking forward to in the future. So we're going to start with an introduction. I'll tell you a little bit about myself and my background and how I ended up at AARP. Then we'll go into who AARP is on a national level, but then what do we look like on a state level as well, how we've engaged in public health, our legislative priority for 2023, and then we'll have time for some questions. But again, if you have anything in the midst of my presentation, please feel free to jump in. I'm happy to pause and answer any questions. All right, so I have a kind of roundabout entrance into the world of advocacy. Growing up, I always knew that I enjoyed business, healthcare, and seniors. And I thought to myself, how am I going to combine all of those things? I went to Luther College. I was really fortunate to get to spend time up in Decorah, Iowa. If you've never been, I definitely recommend a quick small trip up there. Beautiful small town. I got to play volleyball up there. Was very fortunate to be a Division III athlete. While I was there, I got a double major in accounting and business management. I thought accounting was something I was good at, but really didn't enjoy. And I said, well, life's too short. I don't really want to do anything I don't enjoy. So I decided that I wanted to combine the three things that I loved the most, which was business, healthcare, and seniors, and I became a licensed nursing home administrator. I worked for a company called Life Care Services based here out of Des Moines, and they relocated me to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where I spent a year gaining my practicum hours in order to sit for the federal and state board exams. Something a lot of people don't realize is that being a nursing home administrator is one of the few healthcare administration roles that you're required to be licensed for. And you are required to do a federal board exam and a state board exam, in addition to different educational credits in gerontology and long-term care services, as well as a certain number of practicum hours. And that varies from state to state. So no two states are alike in their licensure. So I was licensed as an administrator in the state of Wisconsin, and I do still hold that title. So that's why you see LNHA behind my name. I always get a question on what that stands for because it's not a very common one. From there, they relocated me to Terre Haute, Indiana. That's where Indiana State is, if you've never been, just outside of Indianapolis. And they had me take over an 80-bed skilled nursing and a 55-bed assisted living. Mind you, this was during the height of COVID. And so I came into the world of long-term care at arguably one of the most challenging points in the history of long-term care. And it taught me a lot very quickly, both about who I am as a leader, what the industry looks like today, tomorrow, and yesterday. But it also taught me a lot about public health too, and what that looks like and how we engage in that as providers and advocates across the country. But that being said, I decided I was tired of living in states where I knew absolutely no one. It was getting a little lonely. So I moved back to the Des Moines metro. All of my family is here. I'm from here originally. And I made the switch to outpatient care. I decided that the 24/7, 365 operation of a healthcare entity is A, really challenging, but B, especially challenging during COVID. And I wanted to switch more towards the clinic setting or outpatient setting. So I worked for the Iowa Clinic, and I ran 2 of their family medicine practices in Ankeny and North Ankeny. And I was really fortunate to work alongside some great providers and great leaders within the organization, and developed an interest in how can we engage on a broader scale, whether that's policy, advocacy, or whatever that may look like. We talked a lot about population health, and different initiatives that primary care providers can engage with. I was then recruited to come build a corporate and operational compliance program for Wolf Eye Clinic. Being a nursing home administrator, I tend to enjoy the regulatory components. As you know, nursing home administration is one of the most highly regulated healthcare settings in the United States. And I use those skills to then start building a Office of the Inspector General approved compliance program for Wolf Eye Clinic. So I became kind of a policy nut, for lack of a better phrase, sitting in my office writing lots of policies. And interestingly enough, I was looking for ways to get involved in the Des Moines Metro, to stay engaged with the population of seniors that I really love. And I reached out to Brad here at AARP and asked if I could come talk to him about volunteering. How could I get engaged with the senior population here in the state of Iowa? We had a nice chat, and it ended up being a 2-hour conversation that led to, hey, how would you like a job? Would you like to interview for an advocacy position? I said, well, I'm not really looking for a role, but what did you have in mind? And at that time, which is 1 month ago, AARP was looking for a state advocacy manager to really lead the charge, where we engage in legislative priorities and different advocacy causes. So I am a fresh member of the AARP team. I've been here for exactly 1 month as of this week. My first day was when the legislative session started on January 9th. So it's been a whirlwind. There has been a lot of stuff going on, and it's quite the time to join an advocacy role. But I share all of this and my background because I want to highlight for people that, you know, there is no traditional way to get into the interest of public health or advocacy. And there's a lot of different routes that people can take and a lot of different backgrounds that I think are really valuable in the conversation. And I'm fortunate to get to work alongside a lot of people who have a lot of different perspectives. And that's something AARP does a really great job doing, is engaging individuals from all different walks of life and different professional backgrounds to really come together for a collective cause. So enough about me. I want to talk a little bit about who AARP is. You know, prior to taking this role with AARP, I think I would admit my knowledge of the organization was pretty limited. I think I had an idea as to who AARP was, but maybe not the population that they served on a consistent basis. I knew it was seniors, but admittedly, I thought it was pretty much discounts. I think that was the perception that a lot of people hold in the country as it relates to AARP. But little did I know, AARP is actually the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. When I learned that, I was blown away. I think we hear about so many other nonprofit organizations, but AARP is not one that's often on the radar. We have several arms within our corporate structure, and we fall under the nonprofit component of AARP. We are adamantly nonpartisan, and that is something we take very seriously. We work on both sides of the aisle when it comes to advocacy, and it's very important to us that we engage with individuals who are ready to have conversation that's productive. And that takes all different perspectives from all different walks of life. And we work really hard to make sure that we are engaging on both sides of the aisle when it comes to advocacy. And we know that that's really important in order to accomplish the goals that we have. We are dedicated to empowering people 50 and older to choose how they live as they age. And something that became really apparent to me as a nursing home administrator is that oftentimes the most frustration came from the loss of a sense of control. And as a young person myself, I can't fathom what it would be like to lose that kind of control. But it's a reality that a lot of us face, whether it's on a personal level with a parent or a grandparent or another loved one. But AARP really focuses on how can we get individuals 50 and older the resources they need to thrive exactly where they want to be. A friend of mine asked, they said, why do you like old people? Why do you like seniors? They're like, doesn't AARP, isn't it just 50 and older? They're like, is that old? I'm like, no, 50 is not old. Trust me, 50 is not old. When you work in the nursing home industry, 80, 90, even 100 seems lively and youthful. And that's something I really love about AARP. One of our signature phrases or programs that we work with is called Disrupt Aging, and adjusting the perspective when it comes to aging. And I really enjoy hearing from people about how they're disrupting aging in their communities and those perceptions that might come with aging. And I think that this phrase, dedicated to empowering people 50 and older to choose how they live as they age, is really important. Aging does not have to be a passive process. Aging can be a very active and exciting process for people, but we have to give them the tools that they need in order to do it safely and in order to be able to do it how they choose. So that's a really big component of what AARP focuses on, is how can we empower people to kind of chart their own path on this. Nationwide, we have nearly 38 million members. That's an incredible number, and a lot of force behind some of our advocacy work that we do. We work on both the state and federal level, but engage a lot with our members who are interested in certain advocacy concepts to be those boots on the ground and engage with their leaders to say, hey, this is something I'm passionate about, and here's why. We work hard to strengthen communities and advocates for what matters most to families. We focus primarily on these few things: health security, financial stability, and personal fulfillment. So those are three kind of larger buckets as to what AARP focuses on, and I will touch on those a little bit more. Interestingly enough, we also produce the nation's largest circulated publications, which is the AARP magazine and the AARP bulletin. I did not know that coming into this role, and it was surprising to me. But I think it's a really interesting fact about our organization that I always like to include when I'm sharing a little bit more about it. I am going to go backwards a little bit. We were founded in 1958 by a woman named Dr. Ethel Percy Andrus, and she was a former teacher. AARP originally started out as the National Retired Teachers Association. So we have not always been known as AARP. Originally, the phrase AARP stood for American Association of Retired Persons. But the shift to just AARP came when we realized that a lot of our members were still actively working. So the phrase retired persons was no longer an applicable membership nomenclature. The original reason that Dr. Ethel Percy Andrus started this was an interesting one. She had a friend who was living in a chicken coop, actually. She was a fellow retired teacher, and she did not have the funds or the resources to make ends meet, and she was living in the back shed chicken coop of another friend. And she was a well-known teacher, well-regarded, really successful. But by the time she was ready to retire, she didn't have what she needed in place. And I share that because I think it's really important, and something we focus on a lot is going back to the root of why we exist. We exist to serve others. And at the end of the day, the core mission we have is to help people. And I think that so often it's easy to get caught up in the politics of everything that people engage in as it relates to different public health issues, or financial security or retirement. But at the end of the day, we exist to serve. And that is the core mission of what Dr. Ethel Percy Andrus intended AARP to be. Another fun fact I like to share about the original membership. Originally, it was $2 per year per household to be a member of AARP. And I think that's so interesting to kind of hear about where we started and where we've come to. Throughout the years, we were supportive of a lot of different legislative pieces that came to the table. Things that we're all familiar with, right? The American Disabilities Act, the Older Americans Act, Social Security amendments, the implementation of Medicare, all of these things AARP had a hand in. And as somebody who, and we can all relate, I'm sure, we've read about it in history books, we learned about it in school, we've even engaged with it professionally, but I did not realize that AARP played a role in that. So we've talked a little bit about the national level, but I want to talk a little bit more about what AARP Iowa looks like. So we are a nationwide organization. We have offices in every state, as well as DC, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. We engage at a local level, a state level, a federal level, and sometimes at a city council level even. That's where the local comes in. But we do things that involve advocacy, educational programming, and fun activities that build social connections. So my role specifically is focused on the advocacy side. So I engage directly with the legislators here at the Capitol to advocate for older Iowans. We look at the bills that are brought forward and weigh their impact on our constituents, being those that are 50 plus. What surprised me stepping into this role is that I didn't quite realize how many things AARP touches. Because when you think about it, anybody who's 50 plus, any of these bills could impact them. And so we work really hard to narrow down what we're focusing on and how can we be the most impactful in that advocacy. We touch things from anywhere from Medicare and Medicaid funding, prescription drug prices, access to healthcare staffing, all the way to utilities, an industry that I never really considered to be a part of this equation, but something that's really important. How are we advocating for seniors who are on a fixed income and protecting them as consumers? So not only do we exist to serve, but we also consider ourselves a fierce defender. We want to defend those. We want to defend those that have contributed to our society for a great many years. So from an advocacy side, obviously during session at the local level, I go back and forth between the Capitol, engage with our team of lobbyists up there, as well as lobbying myself, provide testimony on specific bills, work with our government affairs team at a national level to better understand the purpose or the outline of each bill, and then ultimately put some weight into the ones that we really want to see supported, and then provide constructive feedback to those we think that need work. From an educational programming perspective, things like this, conversations with different groups of people, are a big component of what we do. We have partnerships with other organizations and groups just like this to provide great resources for people 50 plus and also their family members who might be their caregivers to better understand issues in aging. One of the big things we work on right now is a partnership with the Alzheimer's Association in relation to brain health, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But a big component of what we do is education. We do believe that we need to empower folks. We need to empower folks with the knowledge they need in order to thrive in the time past 50. Finally, the more fun components of this are the fun activities that build social connections. So we have a lovely woman named Connie Eastman in our office, and she is our community engagement individual, and she gets to plan the fun stuff. So things like Botanical Blues, we've partnered with the Des Moines Botanical Center, and they host jazz every Sunday night, and we've been a sponsor for that. We do things like Donuts and Coffee, where we'll do meetup and conversation about certain topics or whatever the volunteers want to lead. We do Sip, Sample, and Serve, where we have different tastings and we talk about ways that you can volunteer. We also do practical things, right? Like a shred day for people to shred their important documents that they may not normally have access to. And then we also engage in things from a financial side of life. We host tax aid programs where we help people with their taxes. And we also do tours regarding fraud. So this is something we've partnered with the Attorney General's office on in the past, and we're looking forward to doing so again in the future. But we partner with different towns all over the state of Iowa to host fraud watch conversations. And it's providing seniors and the general public with education as to how to defend yourself against fraud over the phone, through email and phishing schemes, whatever it may be. So we do engage a lot in the fiscal side of life too. It's not strictly healthcare that we like to engage in, because we know that healthcare is not the only component of health that does impact individuals 50 plus. As we know that there's a lot of different components to wellness, and financial security is one of them. And so that's something that we like to engage in as well. We do have two primary communities that we engage in with the most, and this is based primarily on our membership numbers. We have the most members in Des Moines and in Cedar Rapids, and we focus a lot of our efforts on those two communities to make sure, A, that we're reaching the most of our members, but then B, recognizing that there are a lot of other smaller communities outside of Cedar Rapids and Des Moines that can then engage in activities in each of those cities. Interestingly enough, there are only 5 of us for the Iowa office. Brad Anderson is our state director, and then you've got myself, the advocacy manager. Alyssa Bramer is our communications associate state director, and then Melinda Schlosser is our business office manager, and she does a lot of the logistics that we could not do without her help. And then Connie Eastman is our community engagement individual. Then we do have one intern for the year. Brian is a student at Drake, and he is working with us on a lot of different projects. But we are a small but mighty group, and we are located right next to the state capitol, just down the hill. So it's very convenient for me during session. But we do have over 300 volunteers across the state. These volunteers do a wide variety of things. We encourage self-led activity design, and we really trust our volunteers and equip them with the information they need in order to put these events together. So if a volunteer calls Connie up and says, hey, I'd really like to host a barbecue, great. Connie's going to help her find a way to do that. And if there's resources we can provide, or talking points or whatever it may be, we really enjoy seeing our members take charge of what they want to do with their social time. Like I said earlier, we do have key areas of focus, obviously that federal, state, and local advocacy. I've already talked about fraud education, but 2 other things that we haven't talked about yet are livable communities and voter engagement. Livable communities focuses a lot on how are our community infrastructure set up to be aging friendly. So if you look at something like crosswalks or sidewalks, ramps, and particularly we like to focus on ADUs. And this is something I did not know very much about coming into this role, but ADUs are accessory dwelling units. And those are the apartments over top of garages, back houses, or something else of that nature that we encourage families and individuals to consider as a solution to aging in place. Like I said earlier, we like to empower those 50 plus to age where they want to age. And for a lot of people, that's at home. They don't want to go somewhere else. They don't want to go to a facility-based care setting, if at all possible. And we recognize that there are a lot of great options at home, but often it's a matter of space and that people don't have that. So we work a lot with education from a local and city level to say, hey, here's how you could consider an accessory dwelling unit. Another component we engage in is voter engagement. Obviously, we play a role in the political environment. We focus a lot on voter education. In addition to getting people out to vote, we want to make sure that individuals are informed voters based on specific issue topics. We focus a lot on Social Security. Obviously, that is something that impacts our membership pretty directly. But other issues like prescription drugs, whatever it may be, we like to make sure that we equip our members with the information they need in order to make an informed decision when they hit the ballots. So obviously that ramps up during election years and the years prior to that, but we do stay attuned to it throughout the year too. All right, so what you see in front of you is a overview of the state of Iowa based on some of the statistics that AARP thinks are important to focus on. So this is data as of 2022 for most of it, but this is considered our 2023 state fact sheet. And approximately our total state population is about 3.15 million. So that gives you a little bit more context as to the frame of reference for all of these. As of October 2022, like I said, we have about 326,000 AARP members. But I next want to turn your attention to the caregivers down in the bottom right corner. Something AARP has really focused on is how do we engage with the family members of seniors who are at home and need additional care. We have a lot of caregivers across the state that do not have the resources they need in order to be able to keep their loved ones safe. It is remarkable to me that we have over 300,000 caregivers in this state, totaling over 260 million number of care hours on an annual basis. We believe that caregivers are a really important part to the healthcare landscape here in the state of Iowa, and it's something we are extremely dedicated to continuing to find ways to give them the resources that they need to be successful. And it's something that we recognize is going to continue to be something we need to engage in. The state of Iowa will continue to age, and it's something that we all have to come to terms with and recognize that there are solutions that we need to come up with now in order to meet the need later. The next portion I want to turn your attention to is the older workers component there. I think it's pretty remarkable that 34.4% of the labor force in the state of Iowa is over the age of 50. That's pretty remarkable to me. From a population of 3.15 million, that 34% of our labor force is over the age of 50 really does go to show that we have an older state. Add to that, that 18.3% are over the age of 65 in the labor force. We have a Midwestern working spirit here. We, as a society, tend to work longer, and that's great. There are a lot of wonderful benefits to working longer. And we all know that work continues to keep people engaged. And it's something that's really important from both a social, emotional well-being perspective, but also economically, right? We have people who are making wages well into their 60s. And that's great. Retirement is not something that is handed over to individuals. And I know that the Iowa spirit is very much a hardworking one. And they take it very seriously. We take it very seriously. We know that the honor to retire is something that's really held in high regard here. Go into Social Security and retirement income. We've got a lot of Social Security beneficiaries, over 660,000. That's double almost of what our AARP membership is. And we also have 634,000 Medicare beneficiaries. We've got a lot of folks on programs that are targeted towards older individuals, and that should be no surprise to us, right? I think it's also important to note the percent of Medicaid or state funds that are spent on home and community-based services in relation to the caregiving component. We absolutely recognize that there will always be a space and a place for facility-based care. But I think we can all recognize as well that there are a high demand for individuals to be able to receive services at home. And it is a priority of ours to continue to work to find ways to engage in the development of home and community-based services. And that looks like engaging with people like all of you on this call. How can we come to a resolution or a solution to the fact that in rural Iowa, our home and community-based services lack sometimes? And it's something that's really important to the overall well-being of the seniors that we serve and the seniors that we advocate for, whether it's directly or indirectly. All right, so now that I've given you kind of an overview of AARP as an organization, AARP Iowa, and what the state looks like from the eyes of AARP, I want to talk to you a little bit about how we've engaged in public health. Some of this is prior to my time here with AARP, so I can share a little bit about that, but then a lot of this are things that I will kind of look forward to and things that we are currently engaging in as well. So as we all know, COVID-19 changed our worlds forever. Everybody has a COVID story that I'm sure is very impactful, whether it's personal or professional. But as a nursing home administrator during the era of COVID, coming face to face with the realities of COVID was something very, very stark and very real for me as an individual and a professional. But there were a lot of people and players that had to come to the table in order to make COVID relief efforts happen. One of the big things that AARP engaged with during the COVID era is the engagement for the general public to promote vaccination efforts. AARP recognized that it was crucial and vital to get vaccines to institutional-based settings first. Nursing homes, residential care settings, assisted livings, whatever it may be, we recognized and said, yes, that is absolutely that first step. But as those vaccines became available to the public, we engaged strongly in advocating for our seniors as the next line of individuals to be eligible. I don't think anybody would contest the importance of giving individuals access to necessary vaccinations. But one of the things that AARP engaged in specifically was writing a letter to the governor here, Governor Kim Reynolds, about how do we get COVID vaccines to a spot where accessibility isn't an issue. And one of the things that our team here proposed prior to my time was implementing a 2-1-1 solution. So AARP, alongside of other organizations, encouraged Governor Reynolds and her team to implement a call-in 211 option for people to get information about how they can get their vaccine. A lot of what we focus on is access to information. And if you don't know where to get it, it's hard to encourage someone to go do something. So the 211 solution was really impactful during COVID, and something that we feel really did positively contribute to that effort. But obviously, as you all know, public health does not extend only to vaccination efforts, or even to only traditional healthcare in the most standard of sense, but it also looks at healthy living. Population health, in my eyes, really covers a broad range of topics. Just like AARP, there's a lot of parallels between the two, but we really encourage our members to engage in behaviors that promote healthy living. One of the things we're looking forward to this spring is we are partnering with the Parks and Rec Department in both Des Moines and Cedar Rapids to host a Passport to Healthy Living series, where our members will have quite literally a passport that they will get stamped or marked off for participating in different activities that promote the different dimensions of wellness. I'm really excited to see this take off and think that it can have some really great impact on seniors across our state. We also engage with local bike riding groups to host biking events. We have a group out in Cedar Rapids that does an annual ride. It's really cool to see people engaging in that. It's certainly no RAGBRAI, but it is cool to see a sea of seniors hopping on their bikes and having a good time. As I mentioned earlier, brain health initiatives are another component of things that we work on. We have a partnership with the Alzheimer's Association and are working with them to present across the state of Iowa different brain health topics. This includes things like what kind of dementia services are available to individuals across the state, learning to communicate with a loved one who has dementia, understanding Alzheimer's. There are a lot of different things that we try to engage in as it relates to brain health, and think that it's really important that we continue to support those efforts. I'm sure just like COVID, we all have stories and loved ones who have been impacted by a form of dementia, whether it be Alzheimer's directly or another form of dementia. But we are excited to be able to engage in conversations about the importance of brain health and shed a spotlight on why AARP is so passionate about it. Another thing we like to engage in and feel is really important to engage in is the topic of prescription drug prices. I think we can also all resonate with the idea that medications in the United States are more costly than anywhere else in the world. And AARP has always made it a priority to advocate for our members, who many of which are on a fixed income, and the cost of prescription drugs can be detrimental to some and really put their livelihood at risk without some of these medications. And unfortunately, many seniors do face the choice between groceries and prescription medications. And we know that from a overall health perspective and overall well-being perspective, we need to give seniors the support that they need so that that's no longer a choice that they have to make. We know that adherence to medications is vitally important to the maintenance of chronic conditions. And as somebody who's worked in a primary care setting as well as a nursing home setting, it is vital that we ensure individuals have the medications they need in a timely manner and an affordable manner. I'm sure many of you are aware that the Inflation Reduction Act is taking steps towards this. One of the things that we want to highlight within the Inflation Reduction Act, and while certainly not our creation, something that we're really excited about is the shingles vaccine and its inclusion in Medicare coverage, which is great. And then obviously the insulin cap, $35 out-of-pocket cost for those on Medicare with Medicare Part D. Again, another great step in the right direction. And the establishment of a Medicare price negotiation system. Obviously, that hasn't taken into effect yet, but we are looking forward to seeing what kind of impact that negotiation structure can have. So I share all of these different topics as it relates to how we engage in public health, to share that it certainly may not take a traditional public health approach, but I think that there are a lot of components of what AARP does that overall does benefit the overall health of Iowans across the state. The next thing I want to talk about is our top legislative priority for the year that I do believe directly relates to public health in the state. Next week is our lobby day on February 23rd, and we are advocating for an insulin cap in Iowa. As I mentioned on my previous slide, the Inflation Reduction Act places the insulin cap into place for those on Medicare Part D, and this is at the federal level. But what it does not do is touch the state-regulated insurance plans. In the state of Iowa, that comes to about 250,000 Iowans who are on some form of state-regulated insurance or are self-insured in some capacity. There are over 21 states that have already implemented an insulin cap, and we are urging legislators to introduce a bill that would put Iowa amongst that group of 21 states. We've worked hard with the insurance industry, specifically Wellmark, to come to this agreement and agreed language that would cap the price of insulin prescriptions at $100 per prescription for 31 days supply. This is pretty standard language across the country. When you look at insulin caps, some have achieved lower caps, but not many. $100 seems to be the common denominator in this instance. In 2021, we did get all the way through the House and off the floor and passed 89-2 in the House of Representatives, which is great news for Iowa, and it's something that we look to continue to retain support for on the House side. This year, we're looking to get it introduced on the Senate side. We know that we need support of both the House and Senate in order for this to get signed into effect. But it's something we're really passionate about, and we think it's really important, and we think it can have a really strong impact on a lot of Iowans across the state. So we will be at the Capitol on the 23rd advocating for that, and certainly welcome the support of anybody else within this call who would agree with the need for an insulin cap in the state. And I'm excited to see where it goes. So I hope that I've been able to give you an overview of what AARP is, who we are, what we're all about, how we look to engage in public health, whether it's in a traditional or non-traditional sense. And I would be happy to take any questions that anyone might have, whether it's about AARP in general or public health or whatever it may be. I guess I'll look at the chat here.
Feel free to unmute anyone, turn your camera on, whatever, or put questions in chat. I see Arlene, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, hi. I'm just curious, the hot topic obviously right now is Social Security up at the federal level. And what is AARP at the federal level or even state level? Are they trying to promote this to make sure it stays in place?
Yeah, great question, Arlene. It is a hot topic. You're absolutely right. I think it's always been a hot topic, but particularly right now. So from a federal level, yes, we are absolutely engaging. Something we are actually really excited to engage with this coming election cycle, actually starting this spring, is we are going to be hosting Social Security town hall events across the state to really encourage AARP members and voters alike to come out and have conversation with candidates about their stance on Social Security. We do think it's important to get out in front of that early and have meaningful conversation across both sides of the aisle and both sides of the candidacies. We advocate primarily for Social Security on a federal level and with our national office in DC. But when Brad and I do get a chance to engage with our members of Congress at a federal level, we certainly do, and do think it's important to maintain and preserve Social Security. Thank you for the question, Arlene.
Pamela asked in chat, are there opportunities for student interns with AARP Iowa, MPH graduate students in particular?
Yeah, we do. We typically have at least one intern per year. Admittedly, given I've only been here for a month, I'm not sure if we ever have more than that. But Pamela, I can certainly engage in that conversation. My email's up on the slide there. If you want to send me an email with anything in specific, I'd be happy to talk with you about what your thoughts were. We do use interns. It just depends on kind of what the context is.
Right. John asked, is AARP taking a position on the proposed legislation related to transgender people?
Great question, John. Thank you for submitting that question. AARP is not currently taking a stance on that. We obviously do support diversity and inclusion for all people, and we believe that all people have the right and the need to age how they choose to age, and empowering them to do so. AARP does choose carefully which legislation we engage in to ensure that we can continue to advocate for different efforts across both sides of the aisle. So at this time, no, we haven't weighed in on it, but certainly within our larger policy and our larger belief system, we do believe that all people deserve the ability to age as they choose. Thank you for the question.
All right, Arlene has another question. Does AARP work with League of Women Voters regarding voting in our state?
Great question, Arlene. Our lobbyist, Amy Campbell, is also a lobbyist for the League of Women Voters. And so informally, I'm sure we do. Admittedly, I'm not sure what any official efforts we have with the League of Women Voters. Given that I haven't been here for an election cycle yet, maybe check back with me when that comes to fruition. But if there's something that you had a thought on specifically, please feel free to reach out.
All right, Daniel asks, does AARP poll members to determine what is important to them and determine what efforts to advocate for?
Yeah, great question, Daniel. Yes, we do. We have polling members within our organization. I don't want to say pollsters because that carries kind of a negative connotation, but we have individuals who are focused primarily on member engagement and looking at what topics are top of mind for them. Each state does different polling profiles on a cadence. I don't know what that cadence is and how often they're polled, but we do solicit feedback from our members to ask them where they'd like us to focus our efforts. At the state level, we're also driven by an executive council, so they also help steer where we're engaging. So there's a lot of different ways that we seek input from our members, both formally and informally. But great question.
All right, Rachel asks, who is setting up the passport event in Cedar Rapids? Would be happy to connect you all with some groups that might want to participate.
Yeah, Rachel, if you give me an email, I'll connect you with Connie Eastman. She's our community engagement individual, and she is the one who sets up that passport to healthy living. And she's done a great job so far, and I'm sure she'd be happy to hear from you. Perfect. I will just saw that come across on my other screen. So I will copy your email address there.
All right, any other questions? Feel free to unmute, throw them in the chat, whatever works best. I'm going to put the evaluation link for today's Lunch and Learn in, so if you'd please take a few minutes to fill that out, that would be great. There that is.
Well, thank you everybody for the questions. I appreciate it. And please feel free to reach out if you think of anything else. We are happy to engage in conversation on a wide variety of topics. So.
All right. Well, if there's any more questions, again, go ahead and unmute, throw them in the chat, whatever you'd prefer. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and wrap us up here. So thank you, Paige, for joining us today and sharing with us about AARP. Thanks to all of you who came and shared your lunchtime with us. And we hope you join us again next month. Our March Lunch and Learn will be on the 16th again. We'll be joined by Molly Lee, who's going to speak with us about the intersection of vet med and public health. We're always looking for potential future topics. We're scheduled through the spring season, but we have openings coming next fall. So if you're interested in sharing yours or others' work, you can email me at brett@iowapha.org. Recordings of this Lunch and Learn and all others can be found on our YouTube channel. We hope to see you again next month. Thanks, Paige.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good afternoon.